Chapter 12, Part 2. Little Ann was warming up the ghost coon. I could tell by her voice that she was close to him. Reaching our side, old Dan tore out after her. He was a mad hound. His deep voice was telling her he was coming. We were trotting along, following my dogs, when I heard little Ann's bawling stop. Wait a minute, I said. I think she's treed him. Let's give her time to circle the tree to make sure he's there. Old Dan opened up, bawling treed. Reuben started on. Something's wrong, I said. I can't hear little Ann. Rainey spoke up. Maybe the ghost coon ate her up. I glared at him. Hurrying on, we came to my dogs. Old Dan was bawling at a hole in a large sycamore that had fallen into the river. At that spot, the bank was a good 10 feet above the water level. As the big tree had fallen, the roots had been torn and twisted from the ground. The jagged roots, acting as a drag, had stopped it from falling all the way into the stream. The trunk lay on a steep slant from the top of the bank to the water. Looking down, I could see the broken, tangled mass of the top. Debris from floods had caught in the limbs, forming a drift. Old Dan was trying to dig and gnaw his way into the log. Pulling him from the hole, I held my lantern up and looked down into the dark hollow. I knew that somewhere down below the surface there had to be another hole in the trunk. The water had filled the hollow to the river level. Reuben, looking over my shoulder, said, "That coon couldn't be in there. If he was, he'd be drowned." I agreed. Rainey spoke up. "You ready to pay off?" he asked. "I told you the hounds couldn't tree the ghost coon." I told him the show wasn't over. Little Ann had never bald treed, and I knew she wouldn't until she knew exactly where the coon was. Working the bank up and down and not finding the trail, she swam across the river and worked the other side. For a good half hour, she searched that side before she came back across to where the old Dan was. She sniffed around the hollow log. "We might as well get away from her. Here," Rainey said. "They ain't going to find the ghost coon." "It sure looks that way," Reuben said. I told them I wasn't giving up until my dogs did. "You just want to be stubborn," Reuben said. "I'm ready for my money now." I asked him to wait a few minutes. "It ain't no use," he said. "No hound yet ever treed that ghost coon." Hearing a whine, I turned around. Little Ann had crawled up the log and was inching her way down the slick trunk toward the water. I held my lantern up so I could see better. Spraddle-legged, claws digging into the bark, she was easing her way down. "You'd better get her out of there," Reuben said. "If she gets down in that old treetop, she'll drown." Reuben didn't know my little Ann. Once her feet slipped, I saw her hindquarters fall off to the one side. She didn't get scared. Slowly, she eased her legs back up on the log. I made no reply. I just watched and waited. Little Ann eased herself into the water. Swimming to the drift, she started sniffing around. In places it was thin and her legs would break through. Climbing, clawing, and swimming, she searched the drift over, looking for the lost trail. I saw when she stopped searching. With her body half in the water and her front feet curved over a piece of driftwood, she turned her head and looked toward the shore. I could see her head twisting from side to side. I could tell by her actions that she had gotten the scent. With a low whine, she started back. I told Reuben, "I think she smells something." Slowly and carefully, she walked her way through the tangled mass. I lost sight of her when she came close to the undermined bank. She wormed her way under the overhang. I could hear her clawing and wallowing around, and then all hell broke loose. Out from under the bank came the biggest coon I had ever seen, the ghost coon. He came right out over Little Ann. She caught him in the old treetop. I knew she was no match for him in that tangled mass of limbs and logs. He fought his way free and swam for the opposite bank. She was right behind him. Old Dan didn't wait, look, or listen. He piled off the 10-foot bank and disappeared from sight. I looked for him. I knew he was tangled in the debris under the surface. I started to take off my overalls, but stopped when I saw his red head shoot up out of the water. Bawling and clawing his way free of the limbs and logs, he was on his way. On reaching midstream, the ghost coon headed downriver with Little Ann still on his tail. We ran down the riverbank. I could see my dogs clearly in the moonlight. The ghost coon was about 15 feet ahead of Little Ann. About 25 yards behind them came Old Dan, trying so hard to catch up, I whooped to them. Reuben grabbed a pole, saying, "He may come out on this side." Knowing the ghost coon was desperate, I wondered what he would do. Reaching a gravel bar below the high bank, we ran out on to the water's edge. Then the ghost coon did something that I never expected. Coming even with us, he turned from midstream and came straight for us. I heard Reuben yell, "Here he comes!" He churned his way through the shallows and ran right between us. Reuben swung his pole, missed the coon, and almost hit little Ann. The coon headed for the river bottoms with her right on his heels. The bawling of little Ann and our screaming and hollering made so much noise I didn't hear old Dan coming. He tore out of the river, plowed into me, and knocked me down. We ran through the bottoms, following my dogs. I thought the ghost coon was going back to the sycamore log, but he didn't. He ran upriver. While hurrying after them, I looked over at Rainey. For once in his life, I think he was excited. He was whooping and screaming and falling over logs and limbs. I felt good all over. Glancing over at me, Rainey said, "They ain't got him yet." The ghost coon crossed over the river time after time. Seeing that he couldn't shake old Dan and little Ann from his trail, he cut through the river bottoms and ran out into an old field. At this maneuver, Reuben said to Rainey, "He's heading for that tree." "What tree?" I asked. "You'll see," Rainey said. "When he gets tired, he always heads for that tree. That's where he gets his name, the ghost coon. He just disappears." "If he disappears, my dogs will disappear with him," I said. Rainey laughed. I had to admit one thing. The Pritchard boys knew the habits of the ghost coon. I knew he couldn't run all night. He had already far surpassed any coon I had ever chased. "They're just about there," Reuben said. Just then I heard old Dan bark treed. I waited for little Ann's voice. I didn't hear her. I wondered what it could be this time. "He's there all right," Reuben said. "He's in that tree." "Well, come on," I said. "I want to see that tree." "You might as well get your money out," Rainey said. I told him he had said that once before, back on the river.